There. Cool. All right. So, have you done the calculation yourself before?
I just in my head,
Right.
yeah, because I remember I think it was with Mike Shore you were talking about how to do it at the end of the recording. So I went back
Right.
and watched that to figure out how to do the calculation.
Okay. And you got 13 can, right?
Yeah,
Which is super interesting. And the reason why I think it's super interesting, because we all kind of like, let's say we got our own echo chambers or whatever. My energy with the day 8 bats is 13 can. Okay. And of course, like I first met Don Rigo on 8 bats. I first like kind of like that was my first big fire in Momostenango was on 8 bats. And I felt that that was, kind of like when I look at, my relationship with the day Washiki bats, it's kind of like that's where the, kind of like wisdom, knowledge of the ancestors comes through. And probably the power of the ancestors comes through. And for you, that's your initiation day, which I'm sure that at the time when you chose that 11 bats, or how did you get there?
yeah, I didn't choose it. Uh, I was I don't think I've told you this story before, but I was at a point in my journey where I was trying to figure out like if I was going to be a musician and a performer and actually somehow became successful and people were enjoying what I was offering. I was trying to figure out how do I create a persona that causes a person not to want to follow me, idolize me, hold me up in some way. I was looking for some way to kind of protect my persona from the imaginary crowd or whatever, right?
Yeah,
And I was just sort of, how do I do that, you know? And I had this series of experiences back in 2013 that had nothing to do with that, I thought. And it was like a week of difficult challenges. And then at the end of that week, I met someone and I thought I was going to get a job with his company, and he gave me an email to send to or email address to send to his kind of hiring person. And I emailed them, and a week later I got an email back that was a complete like outright rejection. And it was so much of a rejection that there was like a form letter that they send out, you know, and in the title they put dear name, they forgot to put Patrick. So it was like,
right,
yeah. And so the email came as dear name. And so I was not only rejected for the job, but it was like, like they don't even have the courtesy to put my name in there, you know? But then in that sort of sitting in that rejection and thinking like, I just went through all this crazy stuff. How can this be like this outcome? What came to me was, no, this is the answer I've been looking for. And I went through all this stuff related to this job, but what I got back in return was this gift of this idea to use the word name as the title. And that day that the email came to me, that idea came to me was 11 bats.
right.
So that's the birthday.
Okay. That makes total sense that it would be the day you would choose for it. It's just like my giggling halfway through was kind of like when you were saying like about finding a way to protect yourself from being followed by like kind of like by choosing not to have power over others, as it were, and all that kind of thing. And that is, obviously the downfall of Can, right? Or the
Yeah.
dark side of Can, which is super interesting, And of course, the other side of it as well is about, kind of like Can being the channel for the power, the channel for the wisdom, the teacher, and the 13 being connected to spirit. And so the combination, kind of like between your birth energy and the birth energy of name is kind of like, it literally brings out the teacher that brings the spirit. So it's funny the way that this is why I ask, did you choose that? Like, and,
Uh-huh.
kind of, you can look at it from working it back from, kind of like sometimes there might be some like area where you work out, okay, this is what I want to achieve with this project or this
Sure.
person or whatever. And so I'm going to look at the composite energy that I'm looking for and then work out the date that I want to do it on to make that composite energy happen. But in your case, it just flowed out in a very natural way. And now, kind of like looking at it through this lens is something which I think is kind of like it's a. I was going to say like an obvious descriptor, and I don't know whether that's actually even the right way of putting it. But it's like, yeah, hopefully that is what you have been able to bring in through your work with name, as it were.
That is definitely my desire and my goal, and the thing that's even I just did the calculation a couple weeks ago for the first time to come up to realize it was 13 serpent. That was a trip because in Western astrology, I'm big on the 13th constellation of Fucus, and that's the serpent handler, and the constellations holding the constellation serpents, and that's to me that's like the cosmic serpent. So that's similar to that same archetype of 13 So it's like wow, that's pretty
This
neat.
is the bit where I see kind of like um I was going to say the reflection of the matrix.
Mm,
It's like we get these well, I'd say microcosmic and macrocosmic reflections where we see it and we see it and we see it again. And it's like, right, okay, am I seeing this because I am attuned to seeing it? Am I kind of like the red car syndrome kind of thing?
yeah.
Or is this really something? And then you start delving into it like this kind of part of it. And you think, well, hang on, I wasn't even trying there, and it just came out that way. So, it's like it is calling us back again and again and again. Yeah, it's really, really, really interesting. I've seen a few things come out like that just recently. And I think there is also something about the era that we are living in, even with regards to this 10 to 13 year period that we're in right now, watching things line up, watching things, kind of with regards to significant numbers falling on significant days and that kind of thing. Um, there'll be, I don't know whether I know that kind of like when things come out, it's like, right, okay, well, I've been writing my articles for 6.5 years now. I kind of like everybody's sort of like had the experience over 10 times of each of the things, but I was just writing one for Sunday for the free eek, and I added some new material into there because of the solar zenith transit, which is really, really interesting. And looking at all the timing, and I just went through the okay, you've got the zenith transit will happen on 3 eek, and then 80 days later we get canicular on 5 eek, and then 40 days after that on 6 eek, that's when the rain comes back again. And seeing these things kind of like line up, seeing the way that these things work is really interesting. And it's almost as if we ask a question and then it's reflected back to us by the calendar or something like that, which is, yeah, fairly interesting. Anyhow,
Yeah.
we ought to have a look at yours and see what it all kind of like comes out with and means and that. And
Oh, sweet.
you got it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So obviously, yeah, like there's brief like showing of the calculation there, 13 can serpent, and in the Tresena of Ah, which is also going to be important coming out there. Now, I'm not going to put the Year Lord in there simply because it would not work out that way. I mean, it would be very like, I mean, because it was on the day 11 bats, we could go back and have a look and work out in 2013, you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, like
April.
when 13 can fell in 2013, but really this is like about that particular day, your point on that wave.
Mhm.
I still don't quite see it as incorporating 2013, which would have been the day or the year one IRC into that, because we're working in a different like space, as it were. So I don't necessarily feel that that should be added, and we can add it in there if we want, or we can take it into account if we want, because it's the breath of fresh air,
Yeah.
right? I can talk about that in a bit. But so, but if we just see that 13 can has its roots in the Trecena of Ach, and that's what it's all about. And this is kind of like, well, that phrase that you used, which I'm sorry, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I'd have to paraphrase anyway, about not wanting to um, take that power, not wanting to have power over others through what you were doing, but more to empower others with, whilst remaining on the same level. Well, that's Ach through and through as well. Okay. And that's the emotional drive there. So
Wow, that's
it's
interesting.
really interesting that um, through the will of the company that sent you that letter, as it were,
Yeah,
has given you exactly what you were looking for in more ways than we were expecting as well.
for sure.
Now,
It's wild.
I've I've left in this chart, and what we could say is that next year, like, because normally I take these out because often, kind of like people are coming to me, they just met somebody. They want to know what their composite energy is with that person or something like that. They've been together 6 months. And we're talking 11 years down the road. So things start to look a little bit kind of like maybe not quite so interesting. But for you, of course, like next year is 2024, which will be 11 years down the road. And this looks like a step further into the power. Okay. So we could look at it as, I mean, if we were to look for, let me just find out, because I'm going to take it from the same kind of like idea that what we need to look for is not for the 13 can day, but for the 11 bats day, because that is the day which makes the 13 can with you, which is what we're looking at, right?
Right.
And so I think where are we looking at? Because I just saw it here.
Give me two
Uh,
seconds. I'm gonna grab. I'm just brewing some tea real quick.
yeah, of course. Okay, so 31st of August,
In 2013.
20, of 2024.
I was 20. Oh, okay. That's when it's gonna be
Yeah,
11.
yeah. So that's kind of like that is your anniversary, as it were, and it would be, let's give you a heads up for it for this year, is going to be, where do I see it? Where do I see it? The 11 F, that's 10 bats. 11 bats. Okay, there you go. So 15th of December of this year will be
That's my
your next
birthday.
one coming around. It's your birthday.
That's my Gregorian birthday. Yeah.
Oh, look at that. Isn't that interesting? Like I say, this is where we look at it and we see
Sure.
kind of like these signs and signals coming back again and go, ah, okay, well, that's intriguing. That just happens to fall on that day.
Yeah.
Um,
So
there we
cool.
go. So, kind of like I think that even more signifies that moving into that next one of, kind of like it falls on your Gregorian birthday, and then next year on the 31st of August, being something which is really okay, like next year is as I rather like to put it about Ish visiting the sacred sites, time to put the batteries in.
Mm.
Okay. It's like you've got the model, you can see what it can potentially do, but it's when the batteries get put in, you're like, whoa. And of course, kind of like when we look at it, you're on this big slope, you're literally crossing the threshold here. You've been feeling it building. It's
Yeah.
like, now let's see what this can do.
Uh,
That's what you're taking out there. So I
huh.
think it's going to be very interesting, kind of like moving in and working with that concept next year. It's like whatever wild ride it's taken you on so far, it's kind of like next year is takeoff, really.
It's interesting.
Okay. So let's have a think about Can to begin with. And we see Can, okay, it is the body lightning, the energy. It is, we could see it as the force, we could see it as, our connection to a greater power as well. We can see Can as the sorcerer, and we can see it as the teacher. And again, it just absolutely blew my mind what you were saying about, kind of like doing it not for self-aggrandizement, as it were, kind of like doing it to pass on the wisdom.
Yeah.
And if there was any time then when we might want to go into something with that sentiment, with that expression before it even starts, I mean, Can is going to be the day to actually choose to say, right, okay, I'm going into this in order to teach, in order to share power, in order to share wisdom, not for anything else,
Yeah.
not to create some illusion, because it can be, you can be well aware that using those tools, it's very easy to create an illusion. It's very easy to, like to draw that energy, and you've set out your aims and objectives before you've even going into it, before you even knew what it was about, as it were,
Yeah.
that's what you've moved into. And so when we see it really, and especially I think looking at it from the point of view that you're a bit past the age of 26. You are more at the age where like we move into this bit where, yeah, we're not really interested in the like seduction and manipulation side of Can like we might be if it was in our 20s or something like that.
Mm.
It's much more into the right, okay, I have this access, I have this power, I carry this power, I carry this wisdom. What am I going to do with it? And very much going into the right, okay, I'm here to make the world a better place through the application of my power and wisdom, through my ability to teach and pass it on to others. Now, of course, there is a cleverness to it, but it's also Can is about the wisdom. It is about, right, okay, we've been through the process of looking for um oh sorry, we've been through the process of gathering the knowledge, and we are full of knowledge, but we take that knowledge and we process it through the real world scenarios.
Mm.
Kind of like we might be on Noch sitting in the monastery in Tibet, learning all the scriptures and learning about all of these ideas and all that kind of thing. But then we take it out to the real world and we're like, well, what flies here and what doesn't fly here? And this is kind of like the important thing as Noch transitions into Can. What Can is doing is it's using its common sense as well.
Mm.
This is, kind of like what I really see, because there are certain things, it's kind of like I think one of my teachers years ago was talking about Chinese medicine and saying, well, Yes, but we also have to remember that this was a system that was developed a couple of thousand years ago, and times were very different then. And so, whilst we might take the main principles from it, there's also certain things which don't necessarily apply in our world that we're in now. And so, for me, the development from Noch to Can is the taking of the base principles of the knowledge and then working out how they work in this world right now so that that wisdom can be transferred in a realistic way that actually helps people to be empowered now. And so this is what I would consider, and we're looking of course at this through the lens of this is your work with name. This is not necessarily your work as a two ish. And this is also not necessarily, if this would even exist, but names work as on its own.
Mm,
This is what happens when you amalgamate and become one with name, as it were.
mm. Yeah,
Kind of like this is what how name helps to bring this out of you, and your energy brings it out of name.
makes sense.
Okay, so the it is I see, obviously Ish as the magician, as the guardian of the altars, and carrying it with the number two is, okay, it's like making a choice about your magic, and kind of like it's a relatively low number. And yet when you combine it with name, all of a sudden that two rises up to a 13. And it's like that's the connection to spirit, the connection to the ancestors flowing through you and bringing you the wisdom, bringing you the power, bringing you the ability to kind of like channel that ancestral wisdom, because 13 can is literally the day of ancestral wisdom. And so however you know as we say, okay, it might have been a fluke by some company sending a letter and then the mail service delivering that letter on that particular day, and you finding and opening that letter on that particular day because you might have been away until the next day or whatever it might have been.
Mm,
Everything conspired to push you in that direction. And I would say that your relationship with name is in order to channel the wisdom of the ancestors through what you create together. And so that is, literally what you're here to do, and to use that to empower the ones around you, and seeing that, kind of like can as the teacher or as the sorcerer, because there would also be likely, and this may be something that steps in from next year onwards, that for me can, and with all of our Noellas and numbers and that, when we carry a 13, you're stepping into an energy which, well, okay, we might see it on your feminine past side, but you're stepping into an energy which is something which is not necessarily something that you've really known before.
mm,
And the 13 being like the roller coaster ride, bringing the very highest highs and the very lowest lows,
mm,
the most positive aspects, but also the most negative aspects of what it's attached to,
mm,
being able to express. And so it will bring you the ability to really bring out that ancestral wisdom, to really be able to empower people through the connection with spirit and that kind of thing. But I think it's also likely to bring out the temptation of, kind of like, um, of that power, of that illusion, the ability kind of like, and what I see with it is like sometimes, well, I like this thing about the only person who sees us as we truly are is ourselves.
mm,
The people around us don't see us as ourselves, even if they're our nearest and dearest, and they, kind of like they're people that have spent a lot of time with us or whatever, because they have their own filter in one way or another. And much as we might not be trying to create an illusion, the energy that we carry may create an illusion on its own, which is what people see. And then they tell us about the illusion that they see, and we're like, "Oh, really? Oh, well, that's kind of cool. Hmm." And then that's where, kind of like theoretically, we might be able to be seduced by that illusion that they are reflecting back to us. It wasn't necessarily kind of like a conscious creation of our own. It was something that just happened.
Yeah.
And I feel that with that 13 can, this is kind of like the dark side of it, of recognizing that from the get-go, and which I think you did with your, we could almost see it as like your mission statement that you started with, of consciously being aware, hey, don't let this illusion build up for anybody. I'm just me. I'm doing my thing. I'm a hollow bone. I'm a divine vessel, kind of like bringing, like, or a vessel for the divine or whatever, rather than, kind of like buying into the propaganda,
Yeah.
because it can also be very difficult when people start, like we're, I would say, experienced enough to know that, kind of like getting our ego stroke might feel nice, but doesn't really do anything for us. And I think that 13 can is liable as it goes forward to get a lot of that happening, kind of like there's so many people that are searching for something. And when we start getting messages that we've changed their world and wow, now it's like they've had their eyes opened by our work, we're like, huh, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But your initial statement, I think, is kind of like, right, yeah, and kind of like always using the same reply. I'm only the messenger, as it were.
Yeah.
So you are drawing through me exactly what you need, and all I can do is to be the purest, emptiest channel to allow that message to come through. And remembering that, like, kind of like, that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
And I think that will, I wouldn't imagine you falling off the cart, but like if there was something that keeps you on the straight and narrow, I think that's it. Now, of course, it is combined with the number 13, and the number 13 representing the connection with the ancestors, the connection with the spirit. And for me, your combination with 11 bats is something which wakes that up
Hmm.
in, I was going to say, an imperceptible way. And the reason why I used that was because, like you combining with the 11 bats, I had no idea what was going to become of me by going to fire ceremony on 8 bats.
Hmm.
It's kind of like we walk into it kind of like we just like walking in a kind of like way like that. And all of a sudden, it's like they're like, oh, great, finally he's turned up. Right. Let's start sending him some messages or whatever the case may be. We're like, oh, where did that come from? How did I, it's like this, well, I mean, it is in some ways a rebirth day.
Hmm.
And kind of like we could see it. We've got the people like Drumvalo that will talk about being a walk-in or whatever. I sometimes think about it being like this is a particularly terrible way of thinking about it. So I apologize in advance. But it's like being like the what do you call it? Like the chambers in a revolver. And
Yeah.
so one is loaded, and then there is a particular point in time where we go through an experience and the chamber clicks round, ready for the next one to be loaded, ready for the next consciousness to be loaded. Now, those consciousnesses are both present within the chambers, and there may be chambers for others to come in as well. But this, I think, is something where, kind of like we can see that both are there. But it's not until that one gets loaded that we're like,
Hmm.
okay. And again, going back to that whole, well, I mean, I know that you're, kind of like, or that from what you've told me before about being involved with the ayahuasca circuit, which is certainly about the, kind of like the serpent vision of the ancestors coming through is very, very strong there. I
Yeah.
don't know when that came into your life,
Oh yeah.
but
Oh,
also kind of like seeing that, this is all very, very powerful medicine. And it's something where if we went back, possibly if we went back pre 2013, And then, if we went, like, let's say we're 10 years ahead of it now, if we went back to 2003 and seeing, let's say, where you were or who you were then compared to where you are now and that kind of thing. Because I always think it's interesting to look back and equidistant from the inflection point to where we are now, seeing how much of that like ancestral wisdom has come to you post 2013.
Yeah.
I think that's what it's here to do. That's here to wake it up. Okay.
Yeah.
And looking at it through the perspective of the Tresena of Ach, of course, Ach is here as the spinal column. This is the acceptance of the bara, of the staff of power, the staff of office, which is here to give you authority over others to one degree, but that of a benevolent father, you know, and it's kind of interesting. Well, it's very interesting, actually. It's really interesting because, like, okay, yes, all right, I see why that is. Because 11 bats is in the first Trecena, it's in the Trecena of Imosh, right?
Yeah.
And so it's basically shifting your own Nawal forwards by 11 days.
Okay.
Because I was looking at it, like, sorry, I was just having a bit of a brain fart there because it's like, I'm looking at it going, well, hang on, two Ish also occurs in the Trecena of Ach, right?
I was tripping on that too. I was like, wait a minute. It's
Y-
already my Tracena.
Yeah.
That's
And
cool.
so you're retaining the same emotional drive that
Yeah.
you've had, which is really to be the upstanding member of the society, of the community, to bring harmony, to bring peace to your community, to support those that need supporting and all that kind of thing. But here it's almost you've like taken it from the 2 to the 13. You kind of like suddenly just like hit the volume,
Yeah.
like right up to 13 and said, right, okay, it's almost as if combining your energy with name gives you the boost of energy to create and bring into the world what you weren't able to bring in as Tuish. And so, like, it just cranks it right up, doesn't it? And it also, bringing through, okay, your Tuish is always going to connect you with the magician element of it. And it's all but there's with the two each we could see it as like the self-sacrifice of the magic. We could see it as kind of like there's like, am I choosing this one or am I choosing that one? And again, we will see that all of this is coming up soon as well, right?
Yeah.
um in fact, 13 can, what's that going to begin with? So you got on that side. So I'm just kind of like, again, calculating it in my head. 12 bats, right? Yesterday is the first. I don't know why I'm calculating it in my head because we could just look at it here.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, the first day of the chart.
Yeah, which was Wednesday.
12 bats.
Yeah.
Thought it was,
Oh no, sorry, that was 12 Kawok.
yeah.
That was, sorry, 12 Tihash. Sorry, the rewind. 12 bats has just come round, right, though?
It's coming, isn't it?
It should be. Maybe it was 11 bats that I was thinking of. I don't know. Sorry, I'm kind of
Yeah,
like,
no, 11 bats just came, what, a month ago?
yeah, sorry, man. I know why it was. It was because I was talking about it yesterday because 12 bats is in the Trecena of Ajpu.
Right.
That's
It's coming.
why I
Oh,
was
that's
like,
interesting.
why did I just literally mention that yesterday? And it was because it's like it's coming up. So, kind of like in 10, 11 days time, we will be beginning this cycle that you're, kind of like this cycle of creativity, this cycle of empowerment is literally about to come up, which is kind of interesting as well.
I guess that
Uh,
makes sense. The today is the first day of two Ish's chart, so 11 days. So this chart's offset by 11 days. Okay, that makes sense.
yes, exactly. So yeah, it's
Huh.
really, really interesting the way that all of these things are just falling into place, right?
Yeah.
But yes, so I mean, certainly I see this, kind of like this is just a greater empowerment of that, kind of like what do we got? Benevolent father figure of the community. This is kind of like, right, okay, yeah, it might be maxing it out, but it's giving you the power and the wisdom to do what you may not have been able to do with Tuish.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Okay. And so, yeah, so this is, kind of like the project. This is who you are within the project.
Hmm.
Uh, and yeah, interesting.
Really interesting.
Okay. So let's have a look. We ought to, uh, you know what I'm going to do? Just while we've got it in mind, I'm going to fill these in for you if you don't mind. It'll just take me a moment to do that because we can, like, uh, and
Oh
then
wow.
that is going to go to 16.
The fifth,
No?
the 9th of May.
Yes.
That's when I'm sitting for my next ayahuasca ceremony.
Yeah,
I
it's
remember when I
all,
looked at what day that was, I was like, 12 bats, that's perfect.
and then,
Understand my creativity. It's a good day to do it.
yep, 15th, and then 17th, and then that's going to be the 21st, hopefully, 21st. No, yes, no, hang on. That's why it is. Yeah, 11 Akabal on the 21st. Yeah.
This is cool. I didn't even think about the pathway of the feathered serpent related to this chart. I was thinking about it related to today being the first day of the two-ish chart.
Yeah.
I've got another one I can, and I did the pathway for names chart when it came up last month, which is part of what inspired me to want to have this conversation with you related to the birth to the combination chart, but also to the pathway of the feathered serpent. Just that the idea of the 9 ceremonies.
Yeah. Um, this is cool as well. Um,
Hmm.
one walk. Where's one walk? Where are you? 6th of. Okay, so there you go. So now you got all the dates on there, to reference and what they might be like around and about. And what we can do, we can go through these. Normally I go sort of like down that side and then down that side.
Right.
What we can do is actually do them in date order.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So
That
we can have a look at that. And the first thing that pops out to me, which is, very kind of like, well, but you've got 8 arc in there, and 8 arc is the Nawal of the altar at my house,
interesting.
which is, kind of like, I think one day you got to come down and visit Guatemala, but
Oh,
like,
for sure. That's definitely happened.
so let's begin with 12 bats. So 9th of May, this is going to be, and this we could see as kind of like being the physical conception of name, right? And it's interesting, we've shifted the numbers one forwards. So, kind of like it would be, crikey, it's baking my head as to with regards to the mathematics of it. But, when we look at it, what could we see with 12 bats? Well, for me, bats, creativity. Bats is about weaving and bringing beauty to the world. And here we see it with the number 12, which is all of your life experience, which, when you've kind of like related the project, it's this kind of like, right, okay, where you might have dibbled and dabbled throughout your life as to with the music and with various art forms or whatever, and it's like, right, okay, now I'm going to bring it all together in one consolidated art form that I'm going to take out to the world and beautify my world, my neighborhood with. This is the conception of the relationship between you and name.
Hmm.
And so, like, speaks for itself, really, doesn't it? So, kind of like,
Yeah.
I would almost say that, like, if we were to look for a practice for that day, I think it would be going back and looking through your previous creative endeavors and looking at how you're going to weave them all together.
Hmm.
In even better, weaving something together using them on that day,
Hmm.
kind of like as a celebration of the beginning of this change, as a celebration of the beginning of that particular path, looking at it and saying, right, okay, kind of like the 12, writing the autobiography. Well, this is, I mean, 12 bats is literally, well, I think I said it in a video yesterday, that's literally what it's all about, because the autobiography could be seen as your creativity, but this is like all of the ways that you've been expressing your art and your creativity through your life, bringing them together in some kind of montage or something like that, or to create something new from it as well.
Hmm.
I think that would be a wonderful activity for that day. Unless you said that that's the day you're going to be sitting with Aya, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I think if you went in there with an intention, it might be with the intention of what parts of my life experience should I weave through my creativity? How do we do it? Kind of like to get the inspiration to say how you're going to put the music together, how you're going to put the art together, how you're going to put, bring into it to bring the best out of it. That's what I would suggest that you might be looking at on that day.
Thank you. I've been trying to
Okay.
hone in on my intention, so that's helpful.
So then we go to the 5 Noch, and this is 15th of May. And I think that this is, again, particularly interesting in the way that you are kind of like on this cusp, about to move into the full power of the 13 can. And the 5 Noch for me is about the working on the logic part of it. Okay. It's the collecting of the information, and it is saying, kind of like, for me, it's also the solving of the problems. It's like, how do we get to where we want to go to? What do I need to overcome in order to do that? And not giving you all of the information that you might need. It's coming through from your past. It's coming through from, kind of like the conception of the project, which could, we could very much see it as the past sort of like 10 years up until this point. And it's almost as if you might only have to, let's say, go through this one, then the next one next year is taking, or when do we say it? Oh, crikey, sorry. Like, I'm getting a bit lost with that. That'd be January and then September next year. So maybe in the one that would be in September of next year, looking at it and saying, right, okay, September, October next year, and looking at it and saying, right, okay, this is where it's shifting. And so you've got two more cycles, like 520 days, where you're putting your work and your energy into solving the problems to get it off the ground. It's like putting your work and your energy into, like, right, okay, I want to read this book, this book, this book. I've got to research this thing, that thing. It's kind of like where you're having to put your concentration, your energy, and your power into acquiring that knowledge, into cataloging it correctly, into thinking things through. And there may be, of course, with the 5, we've always got the temptation to rush into things because it's being pulled forwards by that 13. It's the cheese rolling, the downhill running. We've got to learn to put the brakes on a bit because it's kind of like, right, how much more knowledge can I kind of like stuff in there as I'm going forwards? Because we want it all, but we want that matrix kind of like spike in the back of the head download for the knowledge rather than that slow process of having to read the book or go along to the weekly class or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And so, but this is really kind of like working on, I would say, the acquisition of knowledge. That's really where it's at the moment. It's kind of like, and you're nearly there. You've had that, like I say, you're 10 years into 11. You got 520 days or so to go before it's like, right, okay, we crossed the threshold. And now that knowledge is all being transformed into the wisdom. It's all being transformed into what you'll be teaching. But you still got like these 520 days to, kind of like finish off your reading list, as it were. Okay.
Oh, it's
And
not a lot
so,
of time.
no, that's it. But
Got
I
a lot
think
of reading to do.
that's also kind of like a focus on, if you were to go through the list and make let's say, a realistic time-based list of what you could hope to achieve in the next 200 or 260 or 520 days. Put your reading list in order, as it were, and make sure you have the materials and almost set out. I know it's a very kind of like, sounds very square to kind of like put it like that, as to say, right, okay, I know that it can take me two weeks to read and absorb that book. That means I have, kind of like 26 books that I can read between now and this time next year, or something on that line. And just sort of like maybe set yourself some targets with it or something like that of what knowledge you really want to work with, what knowledge you really want to work on, kind of like where you want to focus your energy with regards to the knowledge that you need to bring in order to take this forwards. Because sometimes there's, kind of like there's the books that we need to read and the books that we need to that we want to read. And it's like, well, I really want to read that, but I know I should be reading this. It's yeah. That's been very present for me this week, actually. But yeah, if yes, I'll talk with you about that. Remind me about the thing with the 819 count at the end. Like, if you want to chat about that for a bit, like let's do it after we've gone through your whole table and that kind of thing. Because I don't want to break the flow, but I wanted to broach that with you as well.
Yeah, thank you.
So on 17th of May, you then go into 7 Kawok on your masculine side. Again, there's some really auspicious days in this chart. 7 Kawok being the end of the physical birthing process. And so again, it is, kind of like what I would say, bats is very much, kind of like when I was talking about it with Don Rigo, like several Washki bats ago. I mean, this is over 10 years ago and that. And he was saying that he connects bats with the gestation cycle, and then Kawok is the birthing of it. And the 7, kind of, I always have this idea when we're talking about Kawok, when we're talking about the birth process and that, it's like, when are we talking about? Are we talking about, kind of being able to see the baby's crown? Are we talking about the head coming out? Are we talking about, the feet coming out? Are we talking about the cutting of the cord? When do we say, right, okay, this is the end of the birthing process? Personally, I think it's when the feet come out, before the cord is cut or whatever. But that should be about it. But this is, the real delivery into the world of what you've been gestating. And, kind of like when we see it with the 7, yes, it can represent endings, it can represent finishing off that birthing process. But I think there's also something there. It's like, right, okay, choosing what you're going to birth and taking it from this anthology that you're creating on 12 bats, or kind of like the whatever it is that you're creating there. 17th of May is, kind of like, it gives you 8 days to complete the creative process from the compilation that comes on 12 bats. through to them bringing it into being on 7 Kawok, bringing it into the physical realm and saying, right, okay, this is the end of that birthing process, the end of that creative process. And so, I was like, I mean, it's pretty obvious. It's like that's the day to release it. I think, it's like if you can get, and especially if something comes through your journey on that 12 bats day, then like releasing it, bringing it out to the world, finishing off the process, the birthing process on the 7K walk, I think is a very appropriate day to be doing that. Okay. Um, yeah, it's like sometimes it just writes itself. Now, the next day along will be your 11 Akabal, and it would be difficult, I would say, in kind of like, I don't know whether I even want to do this, but to split it down and to ask which bit is you and which bit is name.
Mm.
But theoretically, we could see that you are physical and name is non physical.
Mm-hmm.
And so, just because of that, we could say that maybe your conscious self is more on the right hand power and name is more on the left hand power.
Interesting.
And, what we see here now is 11 Akabal and 21st of May. How would we like handle that? How would we work with that? Well, I would say this is all of the new concepts that are coming in through name. This is kind of like, and some of them that, it's kind of almost as if you wouldn't have necessarily have gone in that direction if it hadn't have been through your energetic cooperation or collaboration with name. It's taking you off on a tangent. You go, oh, okay, all right, yeah, okay, well, we can do this a different way, but like, this is fine. Let's go do it. And so for me, this is part of that. But when we combine it with the Akabal, the new concepts, but also the dawn, and I would say, if at all possible, this is the ideal day for, kind of like dream writing. This is your automatic writing when you wake up, but also sunrise gazing, kind of like sun gazing from through the twilight.
Mm.
And so if you can get out into the mountains or get out to, kind of like a good place, a good viewpoint to watch the sunrise over whatever it might be, and understand and like almost whether you have your voice recorder running and just talk with the voice recorder as your stream of consciousness goes through to see what concepts come in through your connection with name on that day.
Mm.
I think that this is, kind of like this is the new threads for your basket. This is the threads which are going to, help to generate that, the creative output as you go forwards.
Okay.
So that would be my chosen exercise for that day, and it is, 11 Akabal is bringing in a whole bunch of new concepts that, like, okay, your collaboration with name brings out of you that yourself couldn't access necessarily. Okay.
Yeah.
We then move to your 13 can day on the 23rd of May. And of course, this being a very, very, very powerful day in all respects, a day of ancestral wisdom, a day of, kind of like spirit teaching, as it were. And, I don't I don't know whether I've ever really asked or that how the people that come that get their readings with me through you and with you and that kind of thing, whether they are people that you mentor or whether they are just friends and colleagues and acquaintances and you hang out and that kind of thing. But I sort of I don't know. I like from my point of view, maybe I got it wrong. I see you as their teacher, and maybe I think that they see you as their teacher as well, in a way. And I think that 13 can would be a great day to, like gather them together or record a video or whatever it is for them
Mm.
about what you are choosing to pass on in collaboration with name.
Mm.
Because
Like that.
13 can is a day to open up to the like the ancestral wisdom that comes through you and that you hold. And I think that when we looked at when I was talking about that earlier, when we talked about earlier, is that it is for the empowerment of all to share that wisdom. And I think that that is, kind of like what I see that you've been, maybe put here to do with those people, because, they obviously, well, hold you in a certain light and that. And maybe there is a certain, I don't know, as I say, because I don't understand or know the process, I don't know where you sit with actually kind of like receiving or accepting the responsibility that you are their teacher in one way or another, that you are their guide to ancestral wisdom, whether it's even, kind of like, bringing them for reading or whatever. There is that part of it. And it's like the 13 can is saying, kind of like to stand up and to allow that to flow. Um, I know that I'm sure that you've heard me say many times before when people are carrying can that energetic practices such as Tai Chi, Qigong, Kundalini Yoga, Aikido, Reiki, or whatever are also the way that you get hold of the serpent. You are the serpent handler, right?
Right.
You're, that's literally what I write to every time. And this is the really important bit. The serpent handler has to know how to handle that serpent.
Yeah.
And we get that through training. And like, I think that the energetic disciplines are things which help us to understand how to work best with that power so that we can use it to empower those around us. And so, kind of like it would be a great day, kind of like Qigong on the mountain or whatever, however you choose to do it. This would be a really good day for doing that and to both receive and pass on ancestral wisdom. I think this is a great day for doing it. Okay. And of course, setting your um, setting your sights on, kind of like where you're going to be in 260 days time. That will be, let's see. So the 15th of April would be 31st of January. So the 23rd of May is going to be somewhere kind of like, what's that? It's going to be a week and it's going to be like about 7th of February next year or something like that. Okay. So if we were looking for February of next year and saying, right, okay, where do you want your name project to be then? Uh, 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 yep, 7th of February next year. Okay. It's projecting it forward to say, right, okay, what are we doing with it? Where do we want it to be? What am I conceiving on that day? And what am I birthing from the last 260 days? Okay. Moving forward from that, we then go to the 25th of May and we come into Tu Ker, taking it into the future and importantly, passing it on to the men of the next generation. And of course, kind of like we've seen this with the diversity of people that you've brought along. Some are older than us, some younger than us, and that kind of thing. And this is like, right, okay, I think with all of this, it's like, right, well, great, you've got that energy, but what are you going to do with it? Where are you going to take it? And to Kech. Well, Kech, the connection with the wilderness, the connection with the animal kingdom, but also spiritual leadership. Okay. And the strength that comes through that kind of leadership. And then combined with the number two, seeing it as the duality, the polarity. Is it stubbornness or is it determination? Is it, kind of like, kind of like, well, Kech is also powerful and it can be dominant, but is it to have dominance or is it to, kind of like to lead? And I think this is something kind of like it's showing men of the next generation their choices when it comes to leadership, their
Mm.
choices when it comes to, kind of like spiritual leadership in particular. But I think that the number two, another thing which I kind of like see in there is self-sacrifice. And it is kind of like showing that the self-sacrifice that comes along with spiritual leadership is sort of like, hey, hang on, there's bits that we have to kind of like let go of in our life if we're to embrace this. And passing that on to the men of the next generation, helping them to understand, kind of like, you want to do that, you're going to have to give that up or whatever in
Mm.
order to do it. Um, Now, if there was something to do, um, Kek is always a day when I was saying go to the forest, go walk in the forest, go and like understand through what comes to you from the forest. And if I was to see anything in that day, this would be a great day for, kind of like a men's circle within the forest to
Mm.
understand how to harness our deer energy, how to harness that like spiritual leadership
Mm.
and understand, how to bring it into balance because it's kind of like the balance between stubbornness and determination. I think that when we go and like do some forest bathing, as it were, that's when we nourish the deer so we can understand the correct course to choose. Moving over to your left hand power, we have six bats, which will fall on the 29th of May. Six bats is, well, it's been a very, very important while in my life. And I have had a lot of personal experience around A6 bats in particular. And I see six bats as being, kind of like I know that I always say that bats is a creative genius, but like this is like just a wonderful, wonderful Noel to have in the intuitive side of your chart because this, when we look at all of this, it doesn't matter how long you would live. None of these nawals are something you can access as a two ish
Mm.
because these are red and black, and ish is only ever going to have a yellow and white chart.
Mm.
And so this is bringing out and bringing into your life something completely different that you were not able to, work with before.
Mm.
And bats, kind of like this is the magician. This is the like sitting in your sorry, it's not the magician, it's the creator. And it's sitting in your creative side. It's sitting in your artistic side. It's the artistic genius. And so it's like literally by bringing your energy together with name project or with name, it is like putting your artistic genius into the artistic side,
Mm.
bringing out like kind of like that
Cool.
ability to weave the beauty in. Now, how is it brought in? It's brought in with the number six, the stability, but also it's grounding it in, but it is also connecting it with the heart of the sky and the heart of the earth. And so, again, we see it coming in a much higher form than what you could like do before. And this is the intuitive side. This is what like names energy brings to your relationship with name. It is like it is stabilizing the creative genius. And so this is, kind of again, when we look at all the gears, the cogs, the like the sequence involved to bring it in on that day, there's no mistake there, there's no accident there. And the six bats women that I have known have been some of the most impressive people that I've ever met with regards to their ability to become a master of their chosen art, but to bring it in a solid, down to earth, grounded, yet divinely connected way.
Mm.
That's what Six Bats is here to do. And that is kind of like the intuitive side. That's the art that name brings to the your relationship with them. Okay. Um, as we go forwards now, this is obviously this is the outcome. This is where you're going. And okay, 40 years time, I mean, we could say that this is going to start to perk up in 26 years time when we cross that threshold and start going into that eldership energy and that.
Yeah.
But this is the point of it. This is the objective. This is where you're going to. And that's that eight the day of celebration of community leadership. Again, we talked about the Trecena of Ach. We know that it is standing up as the father figure, the benevolent father within the community. We know that this is also the spinal column that, kind of like supports us and brings us the bravery to stand up for what is required in society, and also to kind of like stand up and say what is no longer required, what's surplus to requirement in society, whether people want it or not. Because sometimes, Ach has to bring down its staff and say, you shall not pass or whatever, because it's like, that's what we need from our leaders. We need them to stand up for what is right and not, unfortunately, we see they pander to particular groups. Crikey, I mean, don't I suppose we shouldn't get started on kind of like the what we could say, the power of the NRA or stuff like that. You know what I mean? Kind of like how we see politicians caving in on obvious policies that would save lives because of the power of particular lobbying groups or whatever. What we need is somebody to stand up there and say, yeah, you lot, I know you got a lot of money and I know that you represent a lot of people, but you're wrong. And it's not the popular opinion, but we can see that it's something which is needed in our society. Now, kind of like this, whether it's your community, whether it's a wider community, whether it's a country, who knows, whatever, Patrick for president, I don't know. But like, kind of like, well, this is where I go back to the Zaphod Beeblebrox thing. It's kind of like whoever wants to be president should not be allowed to do so. And that is what Ach is about as well, because they're not here to seek out power. They're not here because they want some rank, because they want stripes on their arms that shows what a big man they are within society. They are elected to their position because people see exactly the opposite. Somebody who just wants to work for the betterment of the people that they represent. Somebody who wants to bring harmony to all, regardless of their political leanings or their beliefs or their ethics or whatever it is. It's like, yeah, but I want everybody to have what they need in life because I want to create a harmonious society. That's what Ach is here to do. And eight being the celebration of that. Now, if I were you, I would certainly look on this day of eight Ach on the 31st of May to make a fire, to make, kind of like, whether we're trained in the fire or trained in the Mayan ways, it's like, fire ceremony is your fire ceremony. It's up to you to do it the way that you wish to do it, or have a fire ceremony or whatever it might be, because this is about your connection to your home. It's about your connection to your community. It is about, yes, it is about the masculine energy, but it's to ask for the bravery of our leaders to stand up for what is right. And there is something which I also see in that, which it pains me to say sometimes, because there are people that I just don't think deserve to be in the position that they're in or whatever. But there is also something of like, well, but they are they are the ones with their hands on the rudder right now. So wouldn't it be a better idea to ask, spirit to pray for them to come to their wisdom, for them to come to their senses and grow a spine and do what needs to be done, rather than say, yeah, we don't like them, let's kick them out of the boat. It's like, well, they're in the boat and they're driving, so we better make sure that they make the right decisions.
Yeah.
And so, kind of like a community fire or a community celebration, to, with the focus on, let's send our community leaders the wisdom that they need to stand up and make the right decisions which bring harmony to our community. This can also be a focus on that, but as we see it with, kind of like with you and name going forward, it is like leading it into that stable, balanced, wise leader for the next generation. Because again, this is connecting with the next generation of people, and this is them seeing you. This is where this, kind of like where the teacher becomes the leader that they all want to see. That's where that's coming out. So again, kind of like embracing your leadership, I would say, and calling on particularly the next generation, but your friends, your family, your community to come make ceremony to bring harmony, to bring things together. And then finally, you finish the transition of one Kawok. Like, I mean, this is the birth of birth. This is the bringing of something new into the world, and this is on the feminine side. So yes, this might represent the younger women that you work with. And again, we see, kind of like you're bringing both women and men, or what I see, and you actually have quite an interesting distribution. I would say that in my circles, it is probably getting 85 to 90% female. It's actually quite rare. Once or twice I get these, like right now I'm going through a time when there are more men coming in, and that kind of thing. But like I think just with the field of spirituality, with the field of thinking in general, we get more female than male energy there anyway. And certainly I think that like with this, we are seeing your connection with women of the next generation. And the one Kawok is really the birth of something new. It is total new beginning coming in. And it is showing them how to bring the new into the world. Now, it's helping them through their rebirthing project, which again, this could be something which comes through the visionary plants, because often that is a rebirthing thing as well. That's what I've, kind of like felt from it. And, kind of like there is the one which needs nurture, the newborn that we need to, kind of like coddle, that we need to, give water and nutrients to in order for it to fulfill its potential. Kawok we can also see as the healing essence, the feminine healing essence of compassion. And so, kind of like if we see that with regards to like the future of name is to birth the new into the world, and the future of name is to, kind of like contribute to the compassionate healing energy that helps the feminine to move forwards. Okay, and so this is something where, again, it may be like a gathering of the younger women around you on the 6th of June, to, kind of like to work out, okay, where do we go from here? How are we going to kind of like take that healing energy forwards? Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I think that's what I have to share with you on that chart.
So fascinating.
I love these things where, kind of, as I said, when we look at the sequence that dropped name in on the 11 bats day, that leads to this chart that like unravels, and we see that everything was like, I don't know, oh, crikey, I nearly said everything happens for a reason, but it's literally like kind of like everything is almost predetermined, because we couldn't, like, there are many bits of this that I don't think could have been written better for, like what you're trying to achieve with it.
That's why I feel like everything is predetermined, because as the story unfolds, the outcomes are always far more fascinating and mind blowing and beautiful than anything I could come up with, or I imagine any human could come up with.
Yeah.
It's much bigger than that.
But you had the intuition of what it was about before it came in. And it's
Yeah.
almost as if you that intuition served as the seed that you like put out to spirit, and then spirit returned with like, oh, is this what you were looking for? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, and that was born 2 years earlier my with becoming aware of the concept of Wetiko. And Wetiko specifically is about, among other things, it's about the malignant ego, the issue of that's such a huge problem in the world. When you just look out in the world stage, there's so many huge, Trump's a great example of it, just these unbelievable twisted egos.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like I saw really early that, okay, that's a problem. I saw it in my own life already, but then to see that, this is a singular issue that infuses everyone, and
Yeah.
that the further you get along in a successful way, the more that becomes a roadblock. So how do I square that circle? And that's where I was in the months leading up to the experiences I had in 2013 that led to that email coming.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, like, although you probably don't want to hear this, but like, you know that Osama bin Laden and George Bush Jr. a 13 can. But Obama was 9
Huh.
and like looking at that in the future, and even like I wouldn't like, and obviously I'm not from there and all that kind of thing. I remember Bush being elected, and I remember driving with my stepson and like just kind of like having my head in my hands, going, "Oh crap, this is going to be a problem," kind of thing. When that happened back in, what was it, 2000 or so,
Yeah.
2001, and like kind of like seeing as like, oh my goodness, what is going to happen to the world now? And of course, like, I mean, the world never turned back after that point. But um, it's then seemed strange to me that by 2018 or 2019, somewhere in about there, you're looking at it going kind of like, wouldn't it be nice to have somebody like Bush back in power? Like after watching the shit show that was going on right then.
Yeah.
But like, whilst I recognize that there was some, kind of like, let's say, Obama in his later years wasn't kind of like the promise that I think a lot of people were looking for and that kind of thing. But in his early years, it was groundbreaking. It was amazing. It was like, and wouldn't we rather be listening to one of his speeches and one of Donny's speeches, as it were? You know what I mean? It's kind of like, and for me, as the statesman, and I did get the kind of like, okay, he somehow put himself forward for becoming president. He somehow put himself forward for becoming the candidate and all that kind of thing. But I didn't feel the ego in the same way as many of the others.
Mm-hmm.
There was no ego there. It was like, right, okay, I'm going to do this job, and I'm doing it to the best of my abilities, and I'm going to speak when I need to speak, and kind of like, even as somebody that it doesn't really affect in the same way. You want to listen to him speak,
Yeah.
because when he stands up and speaks, there's an authority, there's a genuineness to it, and you're just like, well, I might not necessarily agree with what he says, but I like the way that he says it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And for me, this is because sometimes we're going to feel that, I don't want to do that. That's no fun. That's going to take my fun away doing that. But yeah, all right. But I know it is necessary. That's what Ach is here to do.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I thought that was, I always found it was really interesting. I think I probably shared with you before. I also worked out the 4th of July, 1776 was also 9 Ach, right?
Right.
And so, yeah, anyway, little tidbits that I kind of like can't resist sharing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think it's interesting how seems to be the main the main thing that's behind the scenes with all of this. So that was the Tricena I was born in. Tricena that name, or that the combination of the two is represented by. It's the completion in the eldership there. that eight showing up at the end of, maybe not the end of the journey, but certainly 40 years in.
Yeah.
Hope that, a lot of it has been accomplished to reach that fullness.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And kind of like if we see that as the, kind of like the output or the outcome or however we want to put it like that. I
Yeah.
mean, you can ask for a lot more when it comes to building society or what you're looking at there is a it is very beneficial. I think it's very much aligned with what I would understand, kind of like your ultimate aims to be, and going back to again this like not wanting to have any power over anybody, not wanting to create any kind of like illusion. The eight arc is really like the outcome of the best option of that. The slightly reluctant leader, kind of like,
Yeah.
come on, we want to hear you talk. Oh, if you say so, kind of thing. Uh,
I also think it's kind of neat that 11 bats is kind of in here with the 11 knockable and the six bats. It's like names, hiding in plain sight there in the chart.
that's it.
The other thing that I thought was interesting, and I was going to ask about this is, because the idea came in right when I was going through my handoff between 2-ish and 10-ish. Because
Okay,
that's when
yeah.
I had that. Well, it was a couple years after that, I guess. But when name appeared, I had moved into 10-ish, and name's conception is 3 akabal. So the combination of 3 akabal and 10-ish is also 13 khan. I was like, wow. And I mean, that makes sense because you're moving, forward and backwards at the same time. But how often in a relationship is it, how often do we look at the elder and the conception or the elder and the elder combination versus just the two combination?
Yeah,
So I thought
yeah.
that was just kind of cool.
It's all weaving and numbers within numbers, isn't it?
Yeah. And then the other thing that lines up with this handoff between 5 Noch and 13 Khan is that the handoff point for names chart is like 10 and 11, so 10 and a half years old, which is right
Yeah,
about this year, like that I'm moving from 3 Akabal into, or that name is moving from 3 Akabal into 11 bats. That's also happening right now or over the next year. So it's very interesting to me to look at this next 2 years, like you said, this next 520 days. And when I look back on it, what will it look like?
yes, yeah. Well, it's I think kind of I don't really want to say it's time to hold on to your hat kind of thing, but it is like big changes. It's like, right, okay, when we step out of that, kind of like well, out of the childhood energy that you're in right now and moving into the like, right, okay. I sometimes think of it like a seed, and like right now the germination is happening below the surface. And then on like you reach the 11th year, and now the like the plant is breaking the surface.
Yeah.
Um and so kind of like it's like becoming fully revealed, and so this can be a very very exciting time to be kind of like to be doing the work that you're doing with them.
It definitely feels that way. It feels like this first 10 years has been all about research, very little interacting with the world. I didn't feel well enough research to even say anything. So I had these ideas and I felt like I had answers, at least for myself, but I don't know how to express that. I needed to do more work. And I
Yeah.
don't feel I'm anywhere near the end of that process, but it's certainly feeling, just with the impetus to start this internet show and start putting my music out over the last couple of years, it feels like I've gotten enough done behind the scenes to be able to start moving into the scene a little bit more.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, it's kind of interesting when you watch seeds growing, and like particularly sunflower seeds, you poke them down or whatever. And the first thing that you see before you see the sprout emerge is you see the ground start to raise up just a little bit above the seed. And maybe that's where you are right now,
Yeah.
but like again, where it's going to is like right now you can't, like, your sprout's still underground and you can't see what happens when you emerge into the world just yet. And hopefully like the next couple of years it's like bang kind of
Yeah.
like thing.
Yeah. Well, it was funny when you said maybe make a list of books to read in the next 520 days. And I sort of chuckled because the creative process that I've been, that what I describe as name, or maybe it's the combination of name and my creative process. I'm not really sure because I didn't really start looking at either of them until they were both together. But uh, 11 bats, it's like, good luck trying to create a plan of action, because it's just like, okay, today I'm doing this and then I'm doing this. And I'm like, cool. I'm excited to do all of it, like, but it's just funny to think of it as okay, I've got 520 days. Which pieces of this am I going to get done? And it's like names just kind of laughing at me, like, good luck,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
no. Anyway, but
It does make me wonder whether that is like, kind of like a really good exercise to sit down with, though,
yeah,
because it's like it is really easy to go off. Yeah. I never know how much to restrict the 11 energy, because it's like there's part of it which is you have to go wander in order to go to all of the places that you need to go to for the full inspiration. But, kind of like, should there be any direction of that? Yeah, yeah,
well,
that's a bit challenging.
that's interesting. It's something I wanted to talk with you about related to the 11, because you often describe the energy as directionless. But
Yeah,
uh, to me, it feels like divinely directed, and that the human ego can't understand that type of movement. It doesn't make sense logically or rationally. So it's kind of the way that the seed germinates, and you've got the single little serpent-like thing going straight up to this, and that's the way like the logical mind understands movement. And then once the plant breaches the surface, it starts spiraling and the leaves are coming out in all these different directions. And it's like, from the logical mind's single direction point of view, it looks directionless. It looks like it's going all over the place, but really
yeah,
there is a guiding principle behind it that
that's
does
it.
dictate the direction at a higher order of magnitude or something.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think what I see kind of like with that directionless, it's kind of like yes, to the let's say to the untrained eye, they don't seem to be following any kind of like particular direction. Well,
Yeah.
to the trained eye, they don't seem to be following any
Yeah.
particular direction. Because they're not pre-planning any particular direction.
Yeah.
Is literally wake up, think about it, know which direction you're going in. But at least to get like, kind of, let's say that if you considered like each of the directions around your bed, like giving them a clock number. So, like to my left is 3 o'clock, to my right is 9 o'clock, and so on and so on, and putting a book at each hour. Now, doesn't say which hour that you've got to go to, but it limits it to 8 books or something like that that you
Mm-hmm.
might find around there. And so, and those books being focused on where it is that you might be kind of like wanting to go, maybe
Mm-hmm.
that would be a way to allow the 11 to have its freedom to explore, although like also kind of like, I don't know. Yeah, anyway, that was just something that came to mind at that moment in time.
Yeah. I like
So
it. No, I think you're right. I think it's foolhardy to just say, I'm not going to even make a plan because it's just going to be wiped away anyway. But I think focusing in on the potential possibilities is a good idea. It's a good practice.
yeah,
Yeah.
cool.
One other question I have
Uh-huh.
about the relationship, because it's something that I've been playing around with a lot over the last few weeks, just thinking about the people in my life and the various combinations. And I'm a two. I've got several friends that are 11s. So my combination with that person is a 13. And so, what, in your experience, what does that indicate? Like when is there, are, I guess the layperson question maybe would be like, is there a better combination for a romantic relationship versus a working relationship versus like, oh, this is a 13 combination. This is all about spiritual development. Don't try to like think of it as a friend or, like not that there's a right answer, but just have you noticed any trends like that?
Yeah, I mean, kind of like from my own point of view, it's also looking at it as what you create together, is that higher or lower than your own energy and their own energy?
Hmm.
Because it's kind of like, if let's say that you created a relationship with somebody that was a one, so that would be with a 12, right? The energy of the relationship is less than your energy and it's less than their energy. And so it might kind of like not hold together because
Hmm.
neither of you would be particularly invested in it.
Interesting.
Or let's say that if you created an energy with somebody who was a with an 11, then you create a 13, which is stronger than you both, which would be very, very powerful.
Okay.
But for me, the 13 is the roller coaster. And it's like, kind of like it might be highly passionate, for example, and highly like attractive, but at the same time, kind of like those passions can turn around the other way
Hmm.
and become anger or something like that. And so, kind of like there's that to think about as well. For me, relationships which create a 6, a 7, or an 8 can be very, very good ones because they are the ones which bring it into balance. They're kind of like there's enough power to keep it going, but not so much that it overwhelms it.
Hmm.
And of course, for you to create a 6, 7, or 8 would be with a 4, 5, or 6.
Hmm.
And so this is something which you could see as kind of like, you know, I have to say that the relationships that come out with 13 might be some of the most exciting ones that we have in life. But, they're kind of like the rocket which just burns out quick.
Hmm.
It's like it soars, it explodes, and then it fades. And,
Right.
kind of like part of it is, what do we want? Because sometimes it's like my relationships with eights have been exactly like that, where we've created a 13 together. I actually have been with two women who carry 8 bats, which have been a 13 can relationship. And it's been a, oh my goodness, can't keep your hands off each other kind of thing. But like, well, not fizzles out, but self-destructs within a couple of months as well, because the 13 is just like it breaks apart kind of thing.
Interesting.
And I think that part of that might come back to that, kind of like the 13 being, it is connected with spirit, it's connected with the ancestors and that kind of thing. And it's often, I think it's, kind of like it's my situation with both of those women was, it was very difficult for, not just for me to keep the hands off them and them to keep their hands off me kind of thing,
Right.
put it that way.
Yeah.
And I think that got in the way of what we were supposed to be doing together.
That's kind of where I'm drilling down to is like, sure, there's an obvious potential romantic connection there, but if there's something else that could be manifested, if that, and maybe it's not an either or, I'm a two, so I'm always going like, it could be this or it could be that, but maybe there's a middle
Yeah.
road where both things can manifest. But I think about it in terms of like, yeah, that would be amazing potentially, but what else could be amazing if I didn't focus all my energy there? What could manifest? What is spirit bringing to this relationship that both of us can gain from, or society can gain from, and instead we went and used all the energy in a romantic capacity, right?
Yeah. And it's kind of like, and then if it does go through the boom bust cycle, then it's like, right, okay, we're still supposed to be doing this spiritual work together, but now we have this kind of like emotional baggage which is hanging around,
Yeah,
which is almost kind of like working against us there. And so
yeah,
it's kind of like, how should we work with that? Um, so yeah, I think it is a useful thing to try and balance it out. And if you want something which is, kind of like steady and long lasting and that kind of thing, sixes, sevens, and eights, that's really what we, probably should be aiming for.
interesting.
Um, how that works or whether that happens is a different matter.
I'll have to
Um,
see.
yeah, and but yeah, that's where I generally see it. And again, and I think it's in many ways the same. If you were looking at six representing family, representing ultimate stability and all that kind of thing, would we not be trying for that with a kind of like with a romantic relationship or something like that? Because we're kind of like we there's something about becoming settled, and a 13 relationship might be interesting once in a while, but after a few of them we're just like, yeah, I get, it's like there's something yeah,
Hmm,
fades about it. The six becomes more interesting. um
interesting.
with a working relationship, it might be that the four is more interesting as well, because something which is solid and down to earth. Now, I think the six is kind of like I'm a big fan of the sixes, right? And that consider it is right. It's a great number all around. A nine could be a good number all around, but for like really getting the practical work done, a four would be very interesting as well.
Hmm.
But you probably wouldn't want a four for a romantic relationship because it's kind of like boring.
That's funny.
It's sort of like it's down to earth, it's grounded, it's as physically supported as you could ever ask for, but it's like just pushing it, get it moving, and do something kind of like thing.
That's
So
interesting in the context of it. It being a two. It's like I wouldn't want to be with another two per se, creating a four. But then there's also like the paradox of to create a six, I would want to be with a four.
yes.
So to create that stability, maybe some boredom is necessary.
Yeah, but there's also kind of like what you see with when you create the six from the four is that the relationship that you create is exactly what the four needs to escape from the box that they put themselves in.
Interesting.
And so when you're together, they might be kind of boring on their own, but when you're together, you actually kind of like help, I'm just going to say, well, you're helping each other to become more stable. You're also helping each other to connect to the divine masculine and divine feminine and bring it into the physical realm. So, like, although they might be a bit boring on their own, once you're around, it's like it shakes them up and it shakes the both of you up. And again, this is where I go back to like the six being one of the most interesting ones to have in relationship.
Hmm. Hmm. And then the
So
13, anytime you're interacting with a 13, it's just you again because it cancels out, which I think is
yes,
interesting too.
yeah, absolutely. It's just sort of like it's a reflection of you. And again, like if we looked at it with regards to um you get to see your reflection and they get to experience what it's like to be a two kind of thing.
Interesting.
And
Hmm.
so for a 13, it could be something which might be very, very calming for them because they're used to being on the roller coaster. And then they're like, when they're together with the two, it's like, oh, peace, finally.
So interesting, man.
Yeah,
Wow.
cool. So I was just going to say, kind of like, I don't know, have you seen this thing coming out about the 819-day cycle?
No.
Okay, so it's been like, it was released about 10 days ago. A paper by Victoria Bricker and I can't remember the guy's name, where they think the 819-day calendar is a calendar which they have never really worked out what it was. And what they've now worked out is if you multiply it and you use the multipliers of it, it is another one that brings together all of the planetary orbits in our solar system.
Oh, cool.
And it's something which they just brought it out, and of course like there's been a lot of people that have it's been coming into them through Facebook or through whatever, and so it has been kind of like showing up and they've been asking me about it. But I have had, let me share you this because I don't know whether Oh, hang on. Save.
This is another Mayan calendar,
Yes. There,
898.
yeah, there was kind of like there was like 26 different calendars.
Yeah.
So what I did, hang on, where are we? We're there. Okay, share screen, share that one. Okay, so what I decided to do was I started off with the 260-day count. Okay. And what I did is to put like the original idea behind it was I wanted to see when all of my Mayan birthdays would be or would have been throughout my life.
Yeah.
And so to correlate it and say, right, okay, kind of like in 1984, when I was going through that, was there something special that happened? And what we find is that every 13 years, the 260-day count matches up with the 360-day count, which nearly matches up with the Venus and Mars cycles.
Hmm.
Okay. And I think I put the error correction on there somewhere, or maybe I didn't on that one. But, kind of like when we look at it, the 0.01 day, 0.01 of a cycle is 6 days.
Okay.
Okay, so this is like 6 days different from the heliacal rise of Venus. It is so close.
Hmm.
It would be almost ridiculous to say that that is not a match. And
Right.
what we find is that that's 3 periods of Mars and 20 periods of Mercury as well.
Hmm.
Uh, and nearly one eclipse cycle. That happens next.
Hmm.
So I think 260-day count was coming in there as well. But what I did when they said about this 819-day cycle is I was like, right, okay, well, I've already got the template with all the data for the periods of various planets and that. What about then creating it with the 819-day cycle? And the 819-day cycle, they said the first thing is obviously Mercury's synodic periods, because you can see 7 periods of Mercury is 819 days exactly. Okay,
Ah,
so that's where they key into it. But
interesting.
where do the other ones fall? When you see Saturn falls really well, Jupiter falls pretty well as well, and then Mars and the 260-day cycle all falls around here. And this is what they're quoting like a 45-year cycle
Huh.
as being really important. But you've probably heard me sort of say before that one of the things that I think was really important was the sunspot cycle, but as a driver of weather.
Yeah.
And what we find is that this is getting very close to sunspot cycles. Now,
Huh.
kind of like we know that the sunspot cycles are pretty rough in their nature, but what we find here later on is that it's really lining up between eclipses and sunspot cycles. And here at 175 years or 170, yeah, about 175 years, it's absolutely spot on with the sunspot cycles.
Huh.
Because I think that this is probably one of the things which it was most important for them to measure, because they needed to know about rainfall and crop cycles and that in order to both, provide for their people, but also to keep power.
Hmm.
And we see this kind of like this cycle around about 100, what's that, 173 to 184 years, that 11-year cycle. Look, it's like bang, 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 kind of like all of these things happening.
Yeah. That's wild.
So anyway, there's very few people that I can actually share that with, so I thought I'd share it
Yeah, I
with you.
appreciate it. That's fascinating. I hadn't heard about that cycle.
Yeah, it's one that I'd heard about a while ago through Jeff Stray's work, but kind of like nobody could really explain what it was there for, and now we sort of like see it. It's like, and as soon as somebody puts that together, I'm trying to write a kind of like a paper about it right now so that I can put it out there and say, is this also what they were looking at? Because I've been trying to find correlations between the calendar and the sunspot cycle for a long time, and I didn't think about the 819-day count. Maybe it's there as well.
Hmm.
So
It's all connected.
yeah. Anyhow, so that's what I have to share with you today.
Thank you so much, brother.
You're so welcome. I better get
Fascinating.
off so I can have some lunch before my next reading.
Have a wonderful day.
You too. I'll
Thank
see
you.
you again soon. All right. Cheers. Bye bye.